Hello and welcome to Starts and Grafts. I'm Connor and each week I'm joined by an emerging artist to discuss the highs and lows of forging a creative career amidst a global pandemic. This week I'm joined by Luca Manning, a singer, songwriter and self-confessed occasional loudmouth from Glasgow. He's kept himself busy this past year performing at online festivals, working on new music and even launching his own podcast. I'm really looking forward to having this chat and can't wait to find out some more. Luca Manning, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is fun, isn't it? It's nice to be on someone else's podcast for a change.
Yeah, because you've launched your own podcast, which I'm very excited to find out a little bit more about. Where are you recording from today?
I'm recording from my home in East London. I'm an East London gal. Kind of Brick Lane area, and yeah, this is me in my bedroom. I'm talking to you today.
Nice. We're recording this just as lockdown restrictions start to ease. Have you been able to get out and make the most of it yet?
Well, it's an interesting one. Do you know, it's amazing to see a bit of life again because I am living relatively central. Like, it's been quite strange in lockdown, like with things not being open, but just in the past week, it's been amazing to like see beautiful people around and people outside in pubs and shops, and just you're like, oh shit, yeah, this is how life is meant to be. And I did go to a couple of pubs on the first night that they opened, but I actually didn't drink, which for anyone that knows me, they'll probably be on the floor in a state of shock right now. But I'm being quite well behaved at the moment for a brief period in my life. So I have been to the pub, but I haven't actually been my usual wasted self. But it's been great seeing life open up again.
You've done well to get a table. I mean, I've struggled so much to book a table.
Well, it was nothing to do with me. I'm very lucky that I have pals who are far more organised than I am. So I just kind of went along with the general plan and didn't actually book anything myself. But I have some stuff for later in the coming months booked, and as we see, like kind of I'm going to a few like DJ sets and open rooftopy things, and I'm sure they'll be good fun.
August bank holiday weekend in London is going to be chaos from the amount of festivals that have already announced their lineups.
Totally. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's amazing. It is a bit overwhelming in the sense that like I've been used to like 7 o'clock, I'm under a blanket watching the telly. If anyone calls me, I'm absolutely outraged. I'm not speaking to anyone. To now being like ready to go out, and suddenly like, yeah, just everyone's announcing these amazing things, and it's like, oh shit, like we need to get on it, need to get tickets for this. It's exciting though. That's how life is meant to be. It's just we've kind of forgotten.
Yeah, it's just kind of a weird adapting back to it.
Have you managed
to
get anywhere?
See, you can tell that you host a podcast because you're asking me questions now.
I like it. I don't get, like people are like, oh, will you come and chat on the podcast? And I'm like, well, if we're going to have a chat, then I'm going to ask you questions.
Have a chat. Yeah, so I'm currently based in Southwest London. I could not for the life of me get a pub in Southwest London for tomorrow. So I'm going all the way to Greenwich, which is a trek.
Yeah, but Greenwich is lovely.
Yeah, it's nice and it'll be really good to catch up with mates. But I want to talk about your music, and I've mentioned that you're a singer and a songwriter, but tell me a little bit more about the music that you make and interests you.
Well, I think this is an interesting time to ask me this, because what I've discovered is a kind of returning to my, I hate this word, eclectic, because I feel like everyone uses it, but my eclectic roots, because I was brought up on such a massively varied kind of palette of music, like through my family and stuff. And then I got really into this niche thing called jazz when I was about 15, and decided that I really, really wanted to understand this kind of newfound language. So I spent years immersing myself in the jazz tradition and jazz music, and came to London to study a degree in jazz. So I'd been making a lot of jazz music, and I released an album, and I gigged a lot in the UK scene. And I think jazz in itself is such a small word to describe a music that's so vast sonically. But I would say that I've predominantly worked in the jazz scene. However, I've now realised that everything I've just said, I want to kind of shake away from. I think that genre in my mind is a bit dead, and the music that I make is just what resonates with me, what tells my narrative, and what excites me just now. One of the most exciting things that I can think about myself is that I can't tell you the music that I might go and write tomorrow morning when I get up in the morning, what that might sound like.
Okay.
Like yesterday I was like completely immersed in like Bjork, and then today I was listening to like some like Althea and Donna, like old reggae tunes, like while I was drinking coffee. It's like, for me, music is just so beautifully diverse, and I love it all. I love soaking all of it up. So I hate the idea of having to kind of put myself in one camp when it comes to talking about my music.
I like what you said then about genre being dead, because I think it can be quite off-putting, and I think it can close people off to tapping into types of music that they don't think is for them or the type of thing that they're into.
Or, the potential of like creating something beautiful, because you're like, oh, well, I don't do that. But you could be like the sickest, like, trad folk guitar player out there, but you want to be fucking Van Halen and you just don't know it. It's like, I don't know, maybe that's an extreme example, but for me, what I've realized is like, I used to just, everywhere you would see my name, it was like jazz singer, jazz singer, jazz singer. And like, I kind of was very comfortable with that, and I was actively pushing that. And then I was like, I think you come to a point where like you're comfortable enough in like who you are, that I know where my roots are and I know what I've been trained in and whatever, but I don't need to kind of shove that in anyone's face stylistically anymore. It's like, what I create is what I create, and I want that to speak for itself.
Do you think that's quite important within jazz? Jazz is often seen as being quite highbrow, I think.
Right.
Do you think there's a need to really solidify yourself within that scene?
Yeah, I think the jazz scene, like when I came to London, like, because the Scottish jazz scene is incredibly diverse in its musical output. Like, what you see coming out of Glasgow, especially where I grew up, is like such an amazing diverse amount of music that's actually represented really well on the UK scene as a whole. Like, the output is massive.
Right.
And when I came to London, you have that same diversity in the music, but it seems to be in little pockets, and like there's scenes within scenes, and then there's people that cross over amongst all these scenes and whatever. But obviously, just coming to London, I was like, I just really wanted to assert myself as someone who was ambitious and someone that could make it in the scene, and I definitely like felt pressure to just be a great jazz singer and like do all the things that were expected of me. But now I'm a bit like, fuck that. There's so much more in the world and in the musical world to be explored, than just what you think. The jazz scene's just a bubble of it's such a bubble, and it's so small, and very quickly you realize, if you do the things that you want to do, then you kind of go, okay, well, actually there's so much else out there, and I don't need to just constantly bash home this jazz thing. And as you say, it can become super highbrow, and like the scene can be quite macho and slightly aggressive in its way of working. So like you just constantly want to like be like, yeah, I'm doing this thing, and then it's like, well, actually, what is that saying? Like, at the end of the day, you just want to make music because you love it. So
Well, there's lots of conversations happening within jazz anyway, and I touched upon that in my conversation a few weeks ago with Helena in terms of, women in jazz and the kind of patriarchy within jazz, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
But what I want to find out a bit more about is your journey. So what are your earliest memories of making music and showing an interest in singing? You talked about that broad range of influences as a child.
Yeah, I don't really remember like, today I'm going to be a singer. Like, I think I always sang and music always resonated with me.
Sure.
I don't come from a family of like musicians by trade, like, but I come from a family of people that love art and are creative and like always loved music. Like, music was always on in the house, and like, I guess like I just was lucky that I was given the opportunity to explore that and supported by my family to, I was like given piano lessons from a young age and always encouraged to perform at parties and stuff. And then I remember like getting into playing like the ukulele because my fingers were a bit too fat to play the guitar, and it was a bit too much hard work. So I was like, let's go for 4 strings instead of 6. And I was like in this little pop rock band, and I'd like write tunes about being kind of angsty. And I was like 13 or 14, and we were like playing gigs around Glasgow, and I was just thrilled that I could like get away with drinking underage in these venues because I was in the band, and kind of just learning how to like sell tickets and kind of hustle in the music scene. And then started kind of more formal training, like there was a great music department at my high school, which I was just lucky to have because it was like a regular state school, but I had amazing music teachers who like did so much extracurricular stuff. And then had like free lessons at school and was able to like do so much there. And then they kind of put me onto this weekly jazz workshop that was being run by the Strathclyde Youth Jazz Orchestra, and that's where I kind of went there, like having gotten into really gotten into like Amy Winehouse records and old school soul stuff like Aretha and Stevie, and then was like, yeah, I know what jazz is, and then rocked up and was like, shit, I actually have no idea what these folk are on about. So then I like kind of went to immersing myself in jazz and started some real kind of formal training in that. And that's when I decided I wanted to go to conservatoire and stuff like that. So yeah, it was all a bit backward for me. Like I didn't have I would say at the start it was mostly informal and like was very much just driven by my love of creating and performing and like making music with other people. And then when I got into jazz, I realized that maybe I needed a bit more like of the groundwork if I wanted to go and study. So
I'd read that before Strathclyde, the Youth Jazz Orchestra there, you'd described yourself as being a bit of a frustrated rock star.
Yeah. I mean that is the kind of thing, because I was brought up in like, so my mom used to always get the singles out, like the old records, and that was like a lot of like Donna Summer and Bronski Beat and like Blondie and the Specials and the Beat, and she was also like really into like punk music. And I remember I went through a lot of like phases, and I was really into punk music and wanted to play like heavier stuff, and just couldn't get my shit together to play the guitar. So then my gran kind of was like, do piano lessons, and thank God she forced me, because the grounding musically has been amazing for that. And then yeah, like just kind of realized that the consistent theme for me has always just been resonating with voices, big voices,
Such as
storytelling. Well, anyone from like Sinead O'Connor to like Stevie Wonder to Billie Holiday, and yeah, then when I got into jazz, like the people that immediately resonated with me were like Chet Baker and Ella and Sarah Vaughan and these kind of people, like a lot more of the kind of melancholy and the like swing, rather than like I never really resonated with the crooner thing straight away. Like I used to like actively disassociate with like Sinatra. I was quite into Tony Bennett, but I had this thing about Sinatra, and the thing is, I fucking love Frank Sinatra, and like his like skill set is incredible, like, as a singer. And but I just felt like I just felt like I was being pigeonholed into this like stereotype of like a crooner. Like if people seen like male vocalist on like a big band gig, then they'd just like chuck me some like half-arsed Sinatra repertoire that was like far too low for me vocally, and I could never do justice because I didn't want to be like that kind of singer. So now I've found a way to like stand on my own 2 feet and do it how I do it. But like I remember at the start like really actively rejecting that kind of stereotype and wanting to be way more like I don't know, like people like Betty Carter and Mark Murphy and people that were just a bit more kind of wacky and out there. And I guess that was the kind of punk thing in me as well. So it was like being a punk but singing jazz music and trying to be a bit kind of edgy. But I don't know. It's all a complex.
It sounds like you've almost can almost picture kind of like what are they called? Not an hourglass kind of thing, but I get this image of you've started off as a child with all these different influences, kind of come down into fine tuning it into jazz, and now you're looking to bring it back out again.
That's actually, yeah, that's a great observation. I kind of feel it. I really do feel like that. There was a period where I needed to hone those skills and I wanted to do certain things, but I feel like now now I'm opening back up again to the other possibilities that are on offer. And yeah, that is kind of how it feels, exactly as you described.
It sounds like there were always lots of opportunities available to you when you were younger
Yeah.
in Glasgow musically, which I think is really interesting because I want to know a little bit about what the arts and culture scene is like in Glasgow, A, because I didn't grow up there, and B, I think, I'm trying to word this in the right way, but I think a lot of English people think of Scottish arts and culture and can't see beyond Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I think that's a fair observation to make.
Totally.
Tell me a little bit about Glasgow and what kind of things are happening there.
I mean, for me, like the Glasgow arts and music scene, well, just the Glasgow creative scene is like absolutely unparalleled. Like, you know, I love the Fringe, and I love that you can go to Edinburgh and drink in the streets, which you can't in Glasgow. But like Glasgow for me, like if you look at the arts scene there, it's just absolutely incredible, and always has been. Like just recently, like I was having this conversation with my gran. Like my gran's like very knowledgeable about like the art scene and like everything like that. And she was telling me that like the Glasgow School of Art was like in the late 19th, early 20th century. Like the Glasgow School of Art was like one of the first art schools to like have like female arts and crafts students, and like the Glasgow girls who were around at that time, they were like dubbed this name of like Glasgow arts and crafts makers, were like kind of the center of not just European arts and crafts but kind of the world, like in terms of they had exhibits all over Europe, and this was all coming out of Glasgow at that time. So I think Glasgow is like a rich history of like having an amazing art scene. But in terms of me growing up, it was just amazing, like the opportunities on offer, like all the venues and all the like bands that were around, and as I say, like people in my school, like, and when I got into jazz, like that scene as well, because I guess because we have the conservatoire, so like the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland is in Glasgow, it's in Glasgow City Centre, so there's so many musicians, and in the courses there, like you don't just have classical, but you have a jazz course and a trad music course, and then actors and dancers and whatever, and you have like great filmmakers. And like I remember there was this, I mean the pivotal point for me was probably like all the musicians that were at conservatoire were like, there was a lot of jam nights and stuff that happened, and this was while I was still at school, and then I'd just go down and like get to know them, and there was like this session that used to happen in a place called Duke's Bar in the West End of Glasgow, started up by an amazing woman called Cheryl Chadha, and Cheryl basically gave me like my first gigs and started like this jam night was so authentic because and so unique, because it would be like a Thursday night and it would be packed, like queues out the door to get in of like young people in their like early 20s to come and listen to jazz music, which is just like not something you'd really seen before in Glasgow. It was kind of like a Sunday afternoon average
Sure.
age of about to die listening to jazz music. Do you know what I mean? So
God's
like,
waiting room kind of vibes.
yeah. So like the energy was just amazing, and then it became really cool to get into jazz music, and the scene was great at that point. And then you know the Blue Arrow Jazz Club was founded, and you know a lot of bands kind of formed or like trialed there. I remember like Graham Costello had started Strata, and they were like doing stuff at Block, which was like a cool new adventure, and everything that Liam was doing with like Quarto Alto, and there was just a lot of stuff happening, a lot of exciting stuff brimming on the horizon.
And you were immersed in that.
Yeah. So like and the jazz scene became so much wider, like both sonically and in terms of the people that operated in it. So like I remember like seeing Kitty around, who like is now a force of nature on the Scottish music scene, and like Kitty's someone that came up in the like maybe the more of the indie circuit, but was able to like come and get involved in the jazz scene. And like now I'd say the Scottish scene is a lot more fluid because of that. So like you have people that aren't necessarily like going to conservatoire or like doing the straight ahead thing, but they're still involved in the jazz scene. And I think that's really important, just to have a variety of people involved, really. So yeah, it was really cool, like, and it still is thriving, really. So it was great to have that.
Amazing. And for you, key moment must have been when you won the Rising Star Award at the Scottish Jazz Awards in 2018.
Yeah,
That must have been unreal.
it was pretty weird. Like that was, so I'd just come to London. I think I was in my first year at uni, and then just to have that recognition, like to be nominated, like was really amazing. To have the recognition from the Scottish scene, have, even though I'd moved away, which was great. And I've always made sure that I stay connected to the Scottish scene throughout my time in London, because it's really important to me. And yeah, to win it was mental. Like it was so bizarre.
How old were you at the time?
18 or 19 maybe.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really strange, but it was so humbling and so beautiful, and like, and obviously gave me like a real boost in my career at that point, which I think is exactly what that award is intended to do. And it just gave me confidence to keep doing what I was doing. And yeah, it was a great night. Like the Scottish Jazz Awards is always a beautiful night of like, you get to see everyone in the one place and drink a lot of free prosecco. And I took my mum and my gran along, and it was all very cute. And yeah, it was great.
Sounds amazing. So then you then went on to release your debut album When the Sun Comes Out in 2019.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process behind making it, and also wanting to put out an album at 19, 20.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I wish I could tell you that there was some big elaborate plan, but it was maybe one of the most erratic decisions I've made to date, really. Like, I just, I wanted to do some recording with Fergus McCready because I just adored him, and I still do. And I just like I think when you find someone, like as a singer especially, like when you find someone that just gets it and gets you, and you can have that amazing musical connection, then I just really wanted to record. And I never really intended to do an album, but I have this amazing teacher at Guildhall called Sarah Coleman, and to be honest, like Sarah's like a mentor and has been throughout my time at college, but I'd met her just prior to coming to college and had this kind of amazing relationship with her, and she suggested like doing an album. So I just booked an extra day of recording, and all of a sudden, like, because it was a duo recording, like we could get away with less planning, and I don't think we actually rehearsed. Like we only got the chance to play together once I'd come up to Glasgow for the recording. So it was very spur of the moment, and all that album was meant to be was a snapshot in time of what those 2 days were like, and I think that was achieved.
Because
So
it's recorded live, isn't it?
it's all live, yeah. It's in a room in Glasgow. Gus did it, just came and threw up some mics, and you can hear like the creaky piano stool and cars passing outside, and it's not, everything's live. We're playing together in the room, and then one of the most special things about that album for me is also that we had Laura McDonald playing on it, who's an incredible alto saxophone player who was another mentor of mine back in Glasgow, and also recently like made it to the MasterChef finals
Oh, really?
on telly. Yeah, she's so inspiring. Like, just honestly, that's been her big journey recently, is that she became a MasterChef finalist, and she's now got this whole new kind of cooking celeb chef career taking off, which is just so inspiring. Talking about lockdown and how creative people have adapted. So yeah, like watching her thrive just now has really made me reminisce of memories of making that album and playing together, and she features on it. And yeah, I listen to that album now and I'm like, oh my god, it's like a baby voice, but still so proud of what I achieved. I did that myself and self-released and made a lot of mistakes, which I've learned from, but I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it.
Do you think having done that so early on has give you time to, like you said, learn from those mistakes and really be
Yeah,
able to reflect? And have you reflected on it much during lockdown in particular?
I suppose I have, because now that I'm looking into releasing new music, like I'm thinking about what the aim of that album was in terms of what it represented and what the aim of my music is now. And that with that album, it was all about like a snapshot in time, as I say, and also maybe gaining recognition from the wider jazz media and jazz community. Whereas now, like as I said before, it's about who I am as an artist, and it's a lot wider in terms of its accessibility and its reach in terms of what I'm creating. So yeah, I think that album served its purpose at that time. And now I'm reflecting and thinking, okay, how far can I take it now?
Because it's a mixture of a couple of original songs and also some of your favourite songs and cover versions of those as well.
Yeah, it's a real kind of mix of stuff, really, isn't it? And I think you can get away with that as a singer because if you're sure of yourself as a singer, then you bring the cohesiveness to the record with your voice and with the way me and Fergus interact. And it's not me plus an accompanist. It's like, it's a duo. It really is a partnership with me and him. So yeah, it felt like I just wanted to pick songs that really meant a lot to me in that moment. And they're songs that I only really play with Fergus now. Like, I'd only really play them with him, and to kind of again tell the story of that time.
I want to talk about collaborations, I think,
Mm.
especially in the context of lockdown. But I think first, shall we listen to one of your tracks?
Oh yeah.
Do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, well, this will lead really nicely into talking about collaboration and in lockdown, because this was all done remotely and is a collaboration with me and two other musicians. So there's an amazing, I sing in a choir called the London Vocal Project, led by Pete Churchill, and someone I met through that, my fellow tenor, is a wonderful musician called Ed Blunt. And Ed had done this amazing vocal arrangement of Here Comes the Sun, but there's a little sneaky mashup in there of another tune that you'll hear. And I just really liked it. And then I kind of forgot about it and then pulled it out one day in lockdown, as you do. We were all kind of sifting through the stuff that we had lying about, and sent him a little recording of me playing it. And then he was like, oh, we should record this. And he laid down some keys. And then I work a lot with a bass player called Hugo Piper, and he's great at bringing like real kind of, it uses the bass in such an innovative way, and adds a lot of multi-layered stuff, multi-track stuff in electronics. So I got him to lay some stuff down in it, and this was our version of Here Comes the Sun, me, Hugo Piper, and Ed Blunt.
Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Little darling, here comes the sun. The sun. I feel like this is the beginning. Though I've loved you for a million years, oh, and if I thought our love was ending, I'd find myself drowning in my own tears.
So that was Luca and Co with Here Comes the Sun. A very apt choice, actually, of song as we start to kind of ease out of lockdown, I feel.
Yeah.
So where can we find not just this track, but actually the rest of your music?
Well, it's kind of dotted around. Obviously, I'm on Spotify and Apple Music, all the normal streaming services. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, my website, and my socials. There's a lot of stuff up there. My Instagram's at Luca Manning _, and I feel like if you just go to Instagram, you'll then find everything else. But yeah, I've not actually released any new music on Spotify or anything for over a year now, but that is very much about to change. But everything, yeah, like stuff like Here Comes the Sun, that's maybe on YouTube or on my socials. These are just little things that I ended up doing a lot of collaborating in lockdown, a lot of recording for various folks. So these things are just kind of dotted around the internet, really.
We'll put a link on our link tree anyway to your website, which then people can
Cool.
kind of like fire off in different directions. We've talked about your journey so far and kind of what you're up to in Scotland and your upbringing, which has been really fascinating. But I want to talk about how you found the past year in particular. How would you go about summarising the past 12 months for you as an artist?
I would say they've been really reflective, challenging, exciting. I mean, I feel so lucky, right? Because I think this pandemic actually has like shown the class struggle that's ongoing up and down the country, and the people that have benefited from it are people that comfortably live as it is, and the people that have suffered are the people that struggle, as they live anyway. So I feel very lucky that I've had the security of being a student, of having a family that can support me, an amazing landlord, and opportunities to work as a creative person. So obviously initially everything kind of, the diary was wiped, of stuff, and we all kind of were like, shit, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
So I took that time off, and then college started coming back. So I've had the routine of like college, whether it's online or in the building. I've had stuff that I've had to do, and then creatively, like, I really feel that actually this time has given me so much to think about and to think, right, what do I want? And we've all had to adapt and improvise and really search for ways to keep going. And I've really found that in myself through like the inspiration of others, like what my pals are doing at the moment, like the way how creative they're being, the music they're making, not just musicians, but all creatives have actually kind of spurred me on to do stuff. So shout out to all the creative folk I know who have just simply kept me going. But yeah, no, I've done things that I would have been incredibly happy to do if the world was back to normal. I've had opportunities to perform, like when I did Jazz Voice at the opening of the London Jazz Festival, and the Ronnie's live stream that I did, and collaborated with people that I never thought I would have, and written music and home recording setups. I never did any of this type of stuff before, so actually it's been a hugely positive thing for me, and I've really taken the reins, taken control of my life in a whole new way, both personally and creatively. But also at times it's been wholly depressing and difficult and lonely, and yeah, it's been a real roller coaster.
Has writing been something that you've turned to much over the past 12 months? I know a lot of my other guests have really used this time to, write something, whether that's been poetry, music, or a script. It's come up a lot.
Yeah, I suppose I have. I have written, again, a mixture of spoken word and collaborations with other people, whether it's lyrics or top line or whole new songs for me. But equally, I hated, this pressure of, right, it's lockdown, go and write the album that's going to make you a star. Because ultimately, I write about the human condition, about life, and about my experiences and my narrative and the experiences of others. And when your experience is like the same thing every day, it's not the most inspiring thing to write about. So it ebbs and flows for me. It's like some days it just comes together and it works, and then other days it doesn't. I'm very lucky that one of my songwriting inspirations and teachers is Feeny Bierman, who in the first lockdown ran a series of songwriting workshops online for people that really gave them techniques and starting points and inspiration and just a chance to share as songwriters. And then again, we've had that in more formal way of classes as part of college. So even in the days where I've not felt inspired, I've got tools there that will spur me on if I really want to have something. But yeah, it's all a balance. Like some days I just want to go for a walk and call my pals and check in with my mum, and then other days I'm writing music and trying to get that together. And I think collaborating for me has been a massive thing, like feeding off the energy of other creatives. I feel like having the input of other creative folk in the form of collaborating is a massive thing for me, because then it doesn't all just rest on your shoulders and you're not the only one hearing it. So yeah.
I thought it was interesting what you said about ebbs and flows with writing. I want to include a piece of advice that we got from the wonderful Joan Iola, an actress who has had an incredible stage career at places like the RSC and the Globe. What she said was that our imagination is made up of a range of fragments, short and sharp, often in the wrong order, sometimes in the day, mainly at night. Right now, our thoughts are a mixture of the jumbled and the clear. My advice would be to write it all down. By jotting things down, we can turn those fragments into the idea for a story. My journal is my marker that my creativity is moving, and in this quiet time, we can listen to what our heart is saying, and it will lead us to what we want to create. Just incredible words there.
Yeah.
That I think almost resonated a little bit with what you were saying about taking notes of the right little things and not forcing yourself to create that big picture all at once, and taking time to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It does resonate with me, because I'm very much, I will write things down. Both I have like a little writing book, and then my phone is filled with, I mean, I'm that nutter in the street who's walking down and singing voice memos into their phone, or writing just like one line in my notes or whatever. And then it means that you have a bag of little creative jewels to pick from if you do get stuck. Some days a whole song will come out, but to be honest, that's rare.
Well, I've seen your Instagram.
Right.
And there you do lots of kind of short 4-line kind of songs with your ukulele and stuff.
Yeah, just little ideas, yeah.
Are they snapshots of your day?
They are, yeah, totally. And then sometimes these songs come into fruition, and I'll have a session with someone and maybe that'll turn into a full thing. But yeah, I'm a big believer in the process and not just the finished product. Especially when it comes to writing with other people and collaborating. It's like, if you walk in expecting a finished number one hit every time, you're actually going to get anything but that. But if you walk in believing in the process and just creating for the sake of creating and keeping, it's like a muscle, songwriting. You just flex the muscle. And like someone told me that Ed Sheeran, like regardless of what you think about his music, he writes a lot of songs for a lot of people. And a pal of mine said that he kind of gave the analogy of like a tap. When you go to a glass of water, you let it run first. So it's like getting all the shit out before you need to kind of get rid of it. So it's okay to just have bits of things and be a bit scatty, because as creative people, we more often than not are. So just write it all down and see what happens.
I love that analogy. I'm definitely stealing that future episodes of the podcast.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? It's cool.
Have you got new material coming out then? It's in the pipeline.
I have, yeah.
Tell me about it. Tell me as much as you can about it.
Yeah, it's hard to know how much I can say, but basically, like, in general, there's going to be a lot of new things from me, which is really exciting. In particular, there is a release coming out early summer, which I'm really, really excited about. And it's a collaboration with two incredible artists. One is Bella and one is Cameron Ward. And the three of us have made something very, very special that we're really proud of. And yeah, we'll be announcing the release date and everything soon. But that's what I can say for now. And that has truly been collaboration in the truest sense. And we did it all remotely throughout lockdown. And it's just really, I'm really proud of it.
How was that remote collaborating? How did you find that?
I found it so fun, so rewarding. But I think that's because I have a previous relation. Like I've known Bella for a long time. We both grew up in Glasgow together in the kind of Glasgow music scene. And despite her being in Leeds and me being in London, like I feel like we both just instantly connected on what we wanted to make. So although it was done remotely, it sounds like we're in the same room, like we're on the same page, just in terms of vibe and everything. And we wrote like instantly, like within a night, like just through voice memos, we'd written this tune. And then Cam Ward is just like an insane producer who just brought it to life. And I think just the three of us were such kindred spirits in that moment. We just knew what we wanted to create. So yeah, I'm excited just for it to be out into the world, to be honest, because that was a collaboration that just worked. There was no stress, it worked. And then, there's a few other things in the pipeline as well, which are collaborations with some amazing people of varying degrees, whether it's just me kind of being featured or maybe I've written something or whatever. It's quite exciting to know that it's all on its way.
Sounds like it's been extremely productive, and I want to talk a little bit about...
Yeah, say that, and then I'm like, I don't know what I've been doing. But yeah, I suppose when I actually sit down and say it, I'm like, okay, no, there's stuff been going on.
But it's hard to kind of give yourself that credit, I think.
Yeah, massively.
Without having someone like me forcing you to kind of bring it out of yourself.
I really struggle with that. Yeah, I really struggle with that, yeah.
But in terms of gigging, you mentioned the Ronnie Scott's live stream session that you did, and that was back in January.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of like preparing for our conversation, I thought it was really interesting that I'd spoken to Helena de Bono, who had done a similar kind of session, but in March, when the roadmap had been announced. You did it back in January, I think, when there wasn't as much kind of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, we were like fully in lockdown, yeah.
So what was that like? And did it feel like this could be what was going to be ahead in terms of live performance for a long time to come?
I mean, well, it was one of my favourite gigs ever, actually, despite there being no audience. I just love playing with those boys, and like, I think because we all had been through Christmas and stuff, which was just really tough. Like, we all needed it, and like to be on a stage with some of my favourite people, I had Tom Potter on drums, Seth Tackberry on bass, and Matt Carter on keys. Just insane band, and we just had fun. We just did fucking fun, and then people were so responsive to it. Like, I think because the quality of the stream at Ronnie's is so good. Like, to me, streaming doesn't replace a live gig at all. They're two separate entities, because one, you're performing to cameras, and one, you're performing to people. So to me, they're different skill sets, and you need them both in a time like this. So it won't replace live gigging as live gigs come back. People want to be in the room because it's a totally different experience. But what that enabled me to have was a whole new reach. Like, I think I checked the YouTube the other day because someone had asked me about this stream specifically, and it's like 4,500 views just on the YouTube stream. That's more people than we ever would have got in Ronnie's on that night. So, it's been cool to have that out there, and I'm really happy with it. And yeah, I think generally the way the industry has made streaming available and the way it's presented really matters to me. It should be an immersive visual experience as well as an audio one, because it's a stream rather than a live gig. Like Laura Mvula, like with her new record, did this incredible live stream, and it was like a full-on immersive experience. And I was like, this is how you do a live stream.
It felt almost like a music video at times.
Yes, exactly. And the way it was shot was like you were in this world with her, and like that to me is where streaming needs to go. It's not like an iPhone camera in your bedroom, as endearing as that is. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
I think it definitely does. Is there live performance on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. So I'm actually at Ronnie's with a live audience on the 28th of June, which I'm really excited about. And I have Charisse as my special guest, who's an incredible singer. yeah, we did that gig at the Spice of Life in Soho with live audience back in October when we could briefly have that. And it was just like an electrifying energy. And it was the first time me and Sharice had actually sung together on a gig. And then we had the opportunity to bring it to Ronnie's. So that'll be the 28th of June. And then I'm going to Austria, all fingers crossed, at the end of July for a festival, which is like this new band that I put together with my own music as 6-piece band, and they're the kind of live things that I'm looking forward to, hopefully.
How's that come about, the gig in Austria?
It was actually through, so it's In Tone Jazz Festival. It's this amazing festival, and they just reached out and asked if I wanted to play, and it was through someone that helps run the Vortex Jazz Club in Dalston that I've played at over the years. And yeah, it was just one of these amazing opportunities that came up, and I'm really happy. Weirdly, me and Fergus are both playing the same year, so like he'll be there with his trio, which is really cute. So hopefully our paths will cross.
That'll be a really nice opportunity to kind of get back together and catch up.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about your music, which is incredible and, like I said, fascinating. But I just want to quickly touch upon what you've been doing outside of music, which is launching your own podcast, the How Not podcast.
Yeah.
What made you want to do that?
Well, I think through COVID, I've reflected on my own creativity and like being an artist. And I think like when you go to a conservatoire, like it's drilled into you to be one thing. So like I was always like, I'm a vocalist, I'm a jazz singer, I'm a musician. And these are all very narrow pathways in the grand scheme of things, because really I'm an artist that's inspired by fashion and creativity and art and like podcasts and like everything. So I just embraced my creativity on like a macro scale, and I was encouraged to do that by someone who does that very well, and that person is Kim McCarry, who co-hosts the podcast with me. So I just reached out to Kim because on my mailing list I was interviewing creative folk that I love every month. So I had like Steph Burrell, who's a dancer that I've collaborated with. I had Zosa Cole, and then I'd asked Kim, and Kim was like, well, why don't we actually just start a podcast? And I was like, all right. And we just did it, and it worked. And we've been, we launched it like last week, and we've had such good response, and episode 1's out, and now we'll record weekly episodes. And it's just been an amazing outlet for my creativity. And there's other things, so the podcast, and I'm also looking at doing some stuff like visually in the creative world that'll be announced quite soon. And yeah, it's all about just opening up my creative being to other art forms and other disciplines that aren't just me as the singer all the time, just so because they all inform each other.
What kind of things can we expect to hear talked about on the podcast?
So we are the podcast that kind of like to talk with two gobby Scottish creatives that like to talk about the big stuff. So we want to create this kind of community of good troublemakers that always kind of think big and ask how not. So we talk about big issues and big ideas, and then also inspiring kind of trailblazers, profiles of people that we love, and as well as things that are closer to home and that we have direct experience of. So our first episode was on the right to protest and this new bill that was being introduced by Priti Patel, and why that's a pile of dog shit. And then our second episode, which will come out this week, is a profile on Keith Haring, the artist that we're both really inspired by. And then we have some other stuff that's more personal to us, and we'll have some guests and all sorts. So yeah, it's really a wide open thing that's just about me and Kim being a bit gobby and enjoying that, really.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that second one then. I didn't know you had that lined up. I love Keith Haring.
Yeah, so tune
There's
into
some
that.
Incredible stuff out there about him, and kind of just that time period in general that he was working with in like 80s New York is insane.
Paradise Garage and Grace Jones and Andy Warhol, and yeah, it's super inspiring.
But I tell you what, it's been amazing to have you on the podcast. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
I've got one
it's been fun.
one last question to kind of round it off with, which is, if you were to look back on what you've achieved so far as an artist, if you could go back and give yourself advice, what would it be?
Massive question, isn't it?
Huge.
I think
the biggest one yet.
I think I'd really like just tell myself to like trust in the journey, like be as authentic as you can, and like just trust that it'll all come in time. My mum always says, what's for you won't go by you. And I think I'm guilty of putting far too much pressure on myself to achieve things. And I just think ultimately the best things happen organically. So I'd just say trust in the process and remain authentic to yourself, and it'll all work out the way it's meant to work out, because I know I'm ambitious anyway and I do the work. So what will be will be.
Brilliant words to end the podcast with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
I want to say a huge thank you to the wonderful Luca Manning for joining me on the podcast. Go and check out his music. You can find it in all the usual places. Don't forget to follow us on social media at startsandgrafts on Twitter and Instagram. I've been your host Connor, Ella's been your producer, and we'll be back again next week for the final episode of this series. But until then, take care.